Hello, I'm Leslie Kaufman. I'm a senior climate change reporter with Bloomberg Green. I'm here today with Gina McCarthy, who has a very important task. She's running climate change policy for the Biden White House. Gina, everyone knows that Biden came in with a very ambitious agenda, which includes a carbon free grid by 2035 and a net zero economy by 2050. But once you get into office, that's a lot to do. I'm hoping you can run through it with us, just a few of the things you're trying to do in the very short term. What are some of the quick things you're trying to get done as you take office?
Well, Leslie, first, thanks for letting me be here and with you, and also tell you how I miss not being in Aspen with you. But it's great to be here, and I thank everybody for joining because these issues are hard to get your head around, but so vital to our ability to live safe, healthy lives. So, one of the reasons why I joined President Biden was because he had a plan that was really aggressive. He didn't come in here and then start scratching his head and saying, well, what do we do about climate change? I had my marching orders before I took the job. And so that's why his explicit call that climate change action happen at a level and a breadth that science demands, which was what was really appealing to me. But in many ways, Leslie, it was more his personal touch about this, his understanding that it's time to be hopeful again. He's been very aggressive in getting out in front of COVID, but also saying what comes next. And that next is we have to rebuild our economy. And he sees the climate issue as being entirely relevant to that question. He wants it to be a clean energy economy that's going to go grow good paying jobs, accessible to unions, help with that transition that we have to make, and help deliver the promises that we have made to the environmental justice community that we're going to invest in them again. And so I am excited to be here because he didn't come with a blank slate. He came with a plan, and it's my job to deliver it.
That's terrific, but as we spoke about, it's an incredibly ambitious plan. He came in, he signed some executive orders, which is very exciting. The Climate Task Force has now met. That's over a score of agencies. I've understand you've listed some priorities for EPA, which include methane and gas, methane and I'm sorry, autos. I'm hoping you could just give us a few more of those priorities. We look out across all the different things you need to get done. What are some of the things you're going to get done in the short term?
At a higher level, it's all about the entire federal government. It's about moving away from the idea that my old agency, EPA, is like the sole purveyor of the issue of climate change and how to fix it. It's not. And so President Biden really created this domestic climate office in my position as a way to say every part of the federal government has to be engaged in the issue of climate change because every part is actually contributing to the challenge of climate change. And so it's all about a whole of government approach so that everybody is looking at their programs and their policies to make sure we're not funneling money to the fossil fuel industry, but thinking instead about the jobs of today and tomorrow and where we need to be. And one of the most important things that we can bring to the table is our ability to actually procure products and services in a way that's going to jumpstart a clean energy economy and send the kind of market-based signals where the private sector will say, aha, so we have lots of electric vehicles being purchased by the United States of America, thousands of them that they might buy every year. Maybe I can edge up to making that 2035 idea that we're going to go all electric that GM announced, something that will be good for everybody. And really, Leslie, we've lost so much time with all the rollbacks of the past 4 or 5 years and the climate denial, both in terms of our credibility domestically, but internationally. That the great thing is that my partner in crime on this is Secretary John Kerry, who is now the envoy that's dealing with the international world. Because we don't just have to get great domestically, we have to get great in terms of providing leadership internationally. We're just not manufacturing at the levels we need. We're not grabbing the economy of the future. We're ceding it to China and other countries, and we need to get that back.
So let's talk about what happened in this country last week in terms of the cold snap and the incredible stress it
Yeah.
put on the electric grid. That was interesting because it showed the weakness of America's electric grid, which I wonder whether you're going to be addressing. But it also showed some of the politics you're up against. You were immediately attacked by the fossil fuel industry for focusing too much on renewables. Um, and this also leads to a question of how much are you talking to the fossil fuel industry and consulting them as you move forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, certainly we're talking to everybody who has some words of wisdom to share and ideas on the table, because part of this is about making sure that it's an open and transparent public process about what we do. The issue in Texas seemed to be a surprise to everybody when we know that climate change is not just creating heat waves, it's creating challenges at both extremes. So now we're seeing record temperatures in Texas, but it wasn't too long ago that they had similar challenges with their grid, and maybe a decade or so ago. And so, what we need to do is make sure that our grid is resilient, and we have to fill the gaps in our transmission so that renewable energy can thrive all across the United States. You know, people may not realize it, but in 2020 we had tremendous amount of growth in both solar and wind, and that was because it's cheaper. It's competing effectively. What happened in Texas was not a failure of renewable energy. It was not a sign that more renewable energy is bad for you or provides instability. Just the opposite. It was the fact that they had not invested in their own systems of refineries to be able to keep them functioning. And did not have a grid that connected Texas with other states in a way that other states are aligned together to make sure that we're relying on one another as a country. So it made the response to that much more difficult. You know, if renewable energy we know is competitive and it's cheaper, and that doesn't matter if you're in a Democratic state or a Republican state. It only matters because we know that it's essential for a clean, healthy, and productive future, but it's also essential today to keep costs down. And so we're going to keep pushing in terms of clean energy and looking at that as the biggest opportunity we have for a stable economic recovery, but one that also grows lots and lots of jobs.
While these goals of getting to a clean grid by 2035 and a net zero economy by 2050 are short, they're also long in some sense. They're still 15 years off, and you're only in office for 4 years. If we were
Yes.
going to look at you at the end of 4 years and say, what are the metrics, what are the milestones that need to be accomplished to know that you guys really moved the ball, what would we look at?
You know, Leslie, I think the whole trick to this is to recognize that envisioning how you get to net zero in 2050 is a difficult task because there's so many years in which innovation is going to happen. So what we need to recognize that even with the clean power plan that I put out to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector when I was EPA administrator, that didn't take more than a week for the Supreme Court or something to stay that rule, right? But nevertheless, it sent a market signal that was undeniable. And we have moved far faster than we ever would have regulated. And so we have to look at this as an opportunity right now for us to develop a nationally determined contribution, which is our way of telling the international community, now that we've rejoined Paris, what we intend to achieve for reductions by 2030. And we're going to deliver that to send a signal about how we get to a strong NDC number in 2030 that puts us on that pathway to 2050 net zero. So you're going to have lots of opportunity to make a judgment in April about how aggressive we're going to be, about all the analytics that underpin it, that looks at transportation, housing, the power sector, the building sector, and what we think we can do as a country moving forward. So I think have plenty to judge. We have plenty that we're going to move out and do. Lots more executive orders to actually roll out. Lots more opportunities for public discussion, and lots of jobs that we're going to create.
That's terrific. I just do want to add one. Does that mean we're going to have clear metrics? You're publishing clear metrics in April that will let us know what, for instance, where you'll be in transportation, where you'll be in electric generation.
Yes. We have a 2030 goal, and we'll be able to underpin it in each of those sectors to tell you what we think is happening in those sectors now, how our investment in our standards are going to push that forward. We'll have opportunities to work with states and cities to get their take on what beyond the federal is going to happen, and we're all going to stand together in Glasgow in November, and we're going to make the United States a proud country again in that forum.
Well, terrific. Gina, thank you so much for your time. I know you've been incredibly busy, and this is an incredibly busy time. So myself and Aspen really thanks you for taking the time to explain this all to us.